You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to WCAT Radio's Inter Vitam et Mortem, Between Life and Death, interviews and discussion with a Catholic Bioethicist. I am your host, Dr. Anne Urlakis, and today I have the privilege of speaking with Sister Dr. Marysia Weber, MD. Before launching fully into today's program and detailing Sister Marysia's extensive background and expertise and hearing her presentation, I'd like to invite Sister to open with a prayer. Sister?
Thank you, Mary Ann. Thank you. Yes. All right. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to be together, to discuss a topic that has brought us attacks from the evil one. We ask you for the graces that will contribute to our weaknesses to triumph over every hostile force, that the beautiful gift of family grows stronger, anchored in your salvific love. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister. I am truly humbled, again, as I look at Sister Dr. Marysia's curriculum vitae, that list of accomplishments and accolades. It's too long for me to summarize adequately, and I apologize for that. Briefly, Sister Marysia is a physician, board-certified in psychiatry, with a fellowship in consulting-liaison psychiatry. She completed her residency and her training at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Sister earned a master's degree in theology from Notre Dame University. She practiced psychiatry at her religious institute's multidisciplinary clinic, Sacred Heart Mercy Healthcare Center in Alma, Michigan, from 1988 to 2014. In 2014, Sister Marysia accepted the role of the Director of the Office of Consecrated Life for the Archdiocese of St. Louis. She is a facilitator for Project Rachel, the chair of the Board of Directors for MyCatholic Doctor, an executive board member of the St. Louis Guild of the Catholic Medical Association, an executive board member for the Institute of Theological Encounter with Science and Technology. Sister also serves as an Adjunct Clinical Instructor in the Department of Psychiatry at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Additionally, Sister Marysia has published numerous articles in peer-reviewed journals. She's authored a number of books, most recently penning 2 chapters in the New Text on Formation, Spiritual Husbands, Spiritual Fathers, Priestly Formation for the 21st Century, edited by Bishop Felipe Estevez and Bishop Andrew Cozzens and published by Holy Apostles College and Seminaries on En Route Books and Media. Sister Marysia is a highly sought-after speaker, and I am really blessed to have her here today, an expert. She has presented to the Roman Curia at the Vatican in 2002 regarding the sexual abuse by clergy in North America. She has an expertise in seminary and religious formation. She's a formator within her own religious community. Welcome, Sister Marysia. I am honored to once again have you here, this time as my guest on Inter Vitam et Mortem, Between Life and Death.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Mary Ann. Delighted to be here.
Before we jump into the topic at hand, which is finding healing and chastity after pornography addiction, compulsion, could you just very, very briefly, just a short, could you tell our audience a little bit about how you came to do what you do?
Surely. You know, it's all God. I, as you said earlier, Mary Ann, am a physician and was really embarking on family practice when I met the Religious Sisters of Mercy of Alma, Michigan. And there, doing a rotation with them, discovered that I had a call to religious life, which is quite a surprise to me. And so I entered the sisters. And then at that point in time, my Mother General asked if I would be willing to consider going on and getting a subspecialty in psychiatry, given that it's such an area of need, and she had wanted to have a religious woman, consecrated woman, to be able to serve the church both priests, seminarians, religious, and laity. And it was a daunting obedience at the time. And so I said, all right, Lord, if this is really what you want. And I had to admit to her, though, there were probably 3 things in medicine that I never wanted to do. I never wanted to work with tissues, so I didn't want to work with pathology. And then I didn't want to be a dermatologist because if it's a rash, you make it wet, and if your rash is wet, you make it dry. And in psychiatry, I was far from perfect, and I knew I had things to work on. And so the thought of trying to help so many individuals, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can really do this. But she also wanted me to train at a very good place in order to be of service to the church. And so I asked and was accepted to do a rotation at the Mayo Clinic. And to my surprise, was offered a residency, didn't even have to apply. And they actually offered me a position on staff, but I said, no, I'm going back to my mother house. And they said, what's your mother house? I said, well, 6,000 people. And, well, who's going to be your team? And I said, well, we'll work on that. My team's going to be the Holy Spirit and everybody that he brings to me. And so it's really been such a privilege to be invited to accompany persons in their area of woundedness and see the grace of God, heal them. And so now, 36 years later, I'm profoundly grateful to be a consecrated religious with my community and to have the privilege to serve in this way.
Well, thank you, sister. Thank you for your fiat. Thank you for saying yes to the vocation that was offered to you. And we are so blessed to have you here, and we are so blessed with your yes. The issue of pornography, compulsion, or addiction, and the very real harm that it causes is a multifaceted issue. It's a human issue that tears at the very bonds of human relations. It's a deeply personal issue. It's a religious and theological issue, for it interferes with one's relationship with God and neighbor, running contrary to the very anthropological roots of human nature and self. It's a scientific issue. It's a medical issue. And it is a bioethical issue involving choices between good and evil outcomes, good and evil behavior, and behavior that deeply affects oneself and others. Sister Marysia, could you sketch the scope of the problem?
I will try my best to do so. I'd like to maybe first consider a little bit of statistics, a little bit of some of the behaviors, and then describe the addiction process and what is really unique about internet pornography, and then look at how to address some of the effects of internet pornography, specifically from a Catholic perspective. I can tell you that when I finished my residency and then a fellowship at the Mayo Clinic and began working, the internet wasn't out yet, so this was 89. And then when the internet became available in 91 and I began to work with individuals, I noticed that there were changes in human behavior that had not been present before the internet became available. And that was a very curious thing for me, and I thought, if I really want to be of service to these individuals, I want to just delve a little bit deeper into this particular area. And at that time, the secular culture wasn't really thinking too much about it at all, but very quickly, in the span of, just a mere, not even 30 years, we're looking at health professionals reporting a growing number, an exponentially growing number of individuals presenting for therapy, seeking to address their urges, their compulsions to view internet pornography, and the devastation this is having on their family life, on their relationships, even their professional work. And so, given this growing difficulty, I've had the privilege of being able to offer workshops to seminarians, to bishops, to priests, to religious, to families, and hopefully help them, who are also in the trenches to address this. And again, as we well know, that if we're not aware of something, we can't bring it to self-knowledge. But once we are aware and understand something, then we can begin to use what we know about the dignity of the human person to help bring healing in those areas and speak quite accurately, certainly religiously, morally, but also even biologically and medically. And that's the beauty of our Catholic faith. It really is so rooted and grounded in the truths of how we are made biologically, made philosophically, made spiritually, in His image and likeness.
Thank you. It is an enormous topic, and I find it fascinating, as you mentioned, that this is a new issue. This isn't something that folks struggled with in the same way 50 years ago, because of the internet, because of the way it is constructed, because of the way we are constructed, our brain chemistry. There is a particular tendency toward the harms and evils that this presents.
Yes, every time I give a presentation on this topic, I always look up some data, and every single time since the internet has become available, sex is the number one search topic on the internet.
Wow.
And more individuals are describing being addicted, or are described by their spouses or family members that care for them as being addicted, to the point where it is considered one of the 4 most common addictions in the world today, and it's growing in its pervasiveness. And this is transcultural, transgenerational. And so there's also concern that we're having a growing number of younger individuals that are addicted to something that we never had a whole band of individuals being addicted to something like we do have today, and that's internet pornography. And we see that now, a growing number of teenage boys and an evolving number of teenage girls who really weren't addicted. You had a few persons addicted to crack cocaine or other chemicals, but the numbers, the skyrocketing numbers now of teenagers who have an addiction, and even preteens that are developing an addiction, is something that has created a pause even in our culture that is not necessarily grounded in moral principles.
I have had multiple attorneys tell me that in terms of divorce, that this is in play in 70 to 90% of the divorce cases that they are seeing.
Yes. Sadly, again, not too surprisingly, divorce cases involving someone who is obsessively interested in pornographic imagery is the reason why their spouse, their partner, if it's a boyfriend or girlfriend, saying that they really do not want to be involved with them. I mean, the pain and the sorrow that is experienced when somebody is so obsessed and they've got to look at these images, and they, don't want, they put on you an image that they have from the pornography, and so the sense of infidelity that emerges is a very painful experience for those who have been married. So yes, and the evil one want to break up the family unit, and so this is a medium that has certainly contributed to that in an astronomical way.
And from there, all of the other evils that flow from it, the slippery slope is real. We've seen that fatherlessness has increased in this country 600% since the advent of the sexual revolution and the birth control pill. And with that, with the fatherlessness in America, we have had an increase in teen suicides and incarcerations and all sorts of social issues and social evils that can be traced back to the fatherlessness. And now we have the culprit of the pornography, the internet pornography on top of it.
Yeah, studies have been done there's a study done of looking at over 50 countries and looking at over 50,000 to 100,000 participants, and they found a link between pornography consumption and lower interpersonal satisfaction and lower levels of marital quality. And, you know, the sad thing is that looking at also another poll, there's a study that's called Till Porn Do Us Part, the longitudinal examination of pornography use and divorce that was done a couple of years ago between 2006 and 2014. And this study found that beginning pornography use doubled one's likelihood to being divorced by the next couple of years. And the most distressing part is the group that was probably going to be most increased in this quadrant of divorce are couples who had initially described themselves as happy in their marriage, but once the internet pornography began to be used, were sadly very, very much dissatisfied. Because again, it's more typically men, although a growing number of women, but the man then who is more likely to use pornography when having sexual intercourse or requests certain acts that, you know, really are using their spouse as an object, or deliberately conjuring images during intimacy to maintain arousal, and then also begins to doubt his own body image and his own performance, so it affects that. And you're mentioning children. You know, we also know that a child that is exposed to pornography within a family setting has increased stress and maybe negative attitudes because the spouse is more attentive to the stress or the trauma of that marriage. And then the one who's using and addicted is less available to the wife and the children. And that, just like you're saying, it creates a higher risk of teens becoming sexually promiscuous, decreased ability for true relationships. And then the low sense of self-esteem, the anxiety, getting into behaviors that are self-harming, and on and on and on. And, you know, we don't have to go far to see this, know this, and studies have demonstrated this unequivocally.
Wow. The harm is very real. Can you talk a bit about the biology behind harm?
Surely. I just want to just say one thing about a statistic, though, that I don't want to forget, is that there's a very recent study that indicates the impact of pornography on children. And today, children under 10 years old now account for 22% of online pornography consumed by children under 18. So we're almost a quarter of the children under 18 years of age that are looking at pornography are 10 years old and under.
Under 10.
And this is a quarter of them. This is a startling statistic. And again, the kind of pornography, as you know, can be very disturbing. It's, you know, having, you know, sexual encounters with even with animals, or the whipping, or the, you know, just the violence that's involved. That just is so confusing. It's said today that youth have more access to internet pornography in 8 hours than their great-grandparents ever had in their lifetime. So getting to
the satanic images.
Oh yes, definitely. You know, looking at the addictive process that's involved in, you know, internet pornography is, you know, basically there are different stages that persons go through, and they don't happen one at a time. They can occur rather rapidly, but it catches the attention very innocently. And so, for example, they might discover an internet pornography image on the website, which is very easy to do. And then by that, kind of encouraged by the anonymity, or thinking that they can secretly experiment with the sexual material online without getting caught, that then kind of sexual feelings, you know, stir, and that begins then to stir some of the neurochemicals. And one of the main chemicals that is involved in pleasure, now I'm going to be very, very simple, is called, you know, dopamine. And we are wired such that in the center of our brain is what is referred to as the pleasure center or the reward center, where God created that we might have, a spritz of dopamine when we're really hungry or thirsty, or appropriately between a man and wife having, intimate relations, that also can put out some dopamine. But we also have what is called the executive function, which is the part of the brain, the prefrontal lobe, that sits on top of our eyes. And that pathway from the pleasure center, because again, as a child, we're going to drink and eat, and so there's basic rudimentary needs that come up, that is stimulated first. But then if we develop the pathway to the frontal lobe, which is involved in planning, pausing, judgment, that's something that we learn as a child grows up. But if we don't travel that pathway, then it doesn't get developed, because then once it does, there's going to be some involvement in self-regulation. Like, for example, I remember when I was at Michigan State University, whenever they put up a building, they never would put down the sidewalks. They'd let the students walk in any door they wanted, and then whenever the ruts were created in the dirt, that's where they laid down the cement. So a pathway that's most traveled is the pathway that gets the strongest. So that's how our brain works. So we need to allow a pause, a ponder, and a reflection to plan and decide, is this too much that I'm eating? Is this too little? Is this too much that I'm drinking? Is this, hyper-arousal of stimulation helping me really cognize, understand what I'm doing? Or is it overstimulating my reward center such that I don't develop this prefrontal cortex, this self-regulatory process where that pathway gets so weak it almost doesn't allow it to be the control center of the pleasure? And then there's a disconnect, and then you get a dysregulation, which is a difficult problem. So if we take a little deeper dive, into the neurophysiology, there's a protein called delta phos-B that is also released when dopamine is released, when we have a spurt of pleasure. And remember, I said to you that it happens when we have, normal pleasure. So let's say you're learning to play golf, and you're practicing your golf swing until you get it right. And then you kind of feel a burst of joy. Now that's dopamine. And accompanying the dopamine is the delta phos-B, and it helps your brain remember how to do this again. So it begins to wire your brain to want to do more to get this golf swing right. Okay. Now, that is very good. However, if the pleasure that is stimulated is pornography, then delta phos-B also accumulates, and it makes you want and desire then more what? Pornography. And this is how we begin to develop like a habit, because it's a pathway that gets developed with that urge to get what gave us pleasure. This next step is actually called sensitization. So you first discover it, you kind of experiment thinking that you're, safe and nobody else is going to know it. Then you do it a little bit more, you develop a habit because of the delta phos-B is released, and now we get to sensitization. But sensitization is very different than tolerance. So for example, if I've never had any alcohol and I have one glass of wine, I'll feel tipsy. And I can have one glass of wine every day for 2 weeks. And maybe after that, I might need more than a glass of wine to feel tipsy. So I become tolerant to the same chemical. Okay. With internet pornography, it's not just tolerant. I just don't need more of the same chemical. I need more titillating images. I need something that will arouse me more because the same kind of images no longer do. So even though it's called sensitization, it's actually I'm becoming desensitized. So that the pornographers then mix, let's say, violence with sex. And so then when you think of sex, what do you think of?
Violence, too.
Violence. And when you think of violence, you think of sex. So it links the two. So now you're stimulating the dopamine and the delta phos-B, and you're also stimulating the norepinephrine. And so that mix in the brain is very stressful because it's not normal. Usually when a man and wife are able to share intimately appropriate to their vocation, there's a calm that exists between them. It's the bonding that occurs between them. But here, more cortisol is released because it just stresses the brain so much. So that's why it's called, pornography is called an erototoxin that really kind of almost poisons the brain rather than, creating a calm and an experience of love. It creates just a desire for lust. And then this desensitization, more FBI agents, when they look at individuals who, really suffer with child pornography, and then they're referred to professionals for assessment, we're discovering more and more that those individuals are not true pedophiles. They aren't primarily interested in children sexually, but they have become what? Desensitized, such that the adult images are no longer arousing for them, so they're going to more risque things. And sadly, that's how they have fallen more to looking also at child pornography. So never before had adult pornography, before the internet, been a breeding ground, for child pornography. So you can see that then there's the compulsion, that it's hard to, get away from it. And at this point, it's not even sexually arousing. And the individual then begins to view pornography, internet pornography, largely by tension and agitation and withdrawal, much like an alcoholic is driven to drink during moments of stress to relieve the stress, because now they're having withdrawal, which creates the craving. And so they really are then rewiring their brain in a way that we just hadn't seen before. And remember I said to you that it's not strengthening the prefrontal cortex, which is where the self-regulation occurs, so that part of the brain is less developed. And because it's less developed, there is lower amounts of gray matter and maybe abnormal amounts of white matter in the frontal lobe, and it creates what is called hypofrontality. We don't quite understand how all of this works together, but we do see that this then creates more the stimulation to the pleasure center and creates a dysfunction and disconnect from the frontal lobe, which will allow you to pause, to ponder, to self-regulate in a way that would be much more healthy. And this wasn't the case when there were just magazines, pornography magazines, because they only came out once a month. And if you flip through the pages too quickly, you'd see nothing. But with internet pornography, we've discovered that it's not just the content or the images that has made this so addictive, but it's the speed at which the medium is delivering these pictures. And that's the beauty of Marshall McLuhan. He was a pioneer in television. He was already saying, you're going to get a lot more stimulation in the brain because the TV will stimulate your brain a lot more than just reading a book. Sure. Well, now 5G, fast internet. So what is creating this addiction is not just the content, because we also see, painfully, persons have become addicted to online gaming. So, and also they can become, a little bit compulsive about using their cell phone too much for social media, wanting to check. So we are discovering that there is a compulsivity to the point of addiction in the use of the internet, period, because of the speed. So it's not just what you're viewing. It's the speed at which what you're viewing is delivered that has altered the neurophysiology of the brain in a way that we never expected, that was not actually present before internet was available to the public in 1991.
And at the same time, we've got an increase in attention deficit issues because we have atrophied our frontal lobe to the point that we are not able to self-regulate. Those behaviors have not been developed.
When you think of the fact that now 22% of children under 10 are the consumers of internet pornography, of those who are 18 years old and under. And we now know that the brain continues to develop until we're 25 years old. Their brains are developing. So if they're getting a lot of stimulation to their reward center by all these visual stimuli and auditory stimuli that a child can't even cognize. They can't understand what's being, sent to their visual center and their auditory centers because it's going too fast for them to understand, to cognize and recognize. So they are developing already a foreshortened pathway, almost a dysfunctional pattern between self-regulation, because it's not stimulated for growth, and what keeps going to that short distance in the center of the brain that just gets stimuli. So painfully, we're creating an addiction at a much younger age, and not just from pornography, I would, also add here. So, when you think of the fact that this is just so available, that I'd like to also mention for those of you who are, looking for ways to describe, because the more we are aware and know something, the more we can hopefully educate others, because education is really key to helping, parents and physicians and priests and seminarians to help others. But there is what is called the AAA engine. And one of these A's as to why there is such an addictive nature to internet pornography is accessibility. So we know that computers are available, cell phones are available to men, women, children, almost everywhere. And this accessibility then makes it just a high risk for individuals to access internet pornography. In fact, those who are employers indicate that about 20% to 25% of individuals are accessing internet pornography at work today, and that is decreasing the productivity. And even more individuals, it's hard to put a percentage on it, are also just accessing their personal social media and emails, such that there's less employee productivity as well. So the accessibility is one of the reasons that it's stimulating the brain. The second A is affordability, because any viewer of any age can access internet pornography. It's so available. You don't even have to have a job. These little 4 or 5-year-old children can access internet pornography. Therefore, about 90 to 95% of persons who view internet pornography, quote, pay nothing. And a very small percentage actually pay a monthly amount. And the third A is anonymity. So while accessing internet pornography website, you have the false belief that there won't be any repercussions from doing so, because, when somebody's intoxicated, they kind of stagger around and might get pulled over for having a DUI. But if it's internet pornography, the individual is able to get his high and keep his addiction a secret, but only for a little while. So I think this AAA engine, the accessibility, the anonymity, and the affordability have really created a very just huge platform for its addictive capacity across the world.
And this industry is doing this on purpose. We mentioned before that certain websites are, especially for children, that the search engines will deliberately be targeting words that are spelled very similarly, one letter off, or URLs that had been abandoned before are now taken up by the industry.
Yes. So they might find a URL or name a URL, Action Man or Pokemon that appeals to children, and then then if a child would then click on that, it would open up to a pornography site. And when the child would try to click out of it, it clicks open to another pornography site. And this is what pornographers do. That's called mouse trapping. So it really tracks the children. So I really encourage youth ministers, parents to tell their children, don't be afraid. If you see something that frightens you, that you get on, the internet, on your phone, on your games, we can talk about it, and then we can look at how to work with this. Because, as we know, because of original sin, sexuality can create in some persons, shame and guilt and secretiveness, and that's the last thing we need to break the bonds of Satan and some of these really destructive patterns that contribute to some real woundedness socially, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That something that's kept a secret like this can keep someone very lonely and on a downward spiral of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and more self-destructive behaviors.
And these are the folks that you end up trying to help, folks that have engaged in behaviors that have now alienated themselves from themselves and everyone else whom they love. There is hope. Could you explain why there's hope and what a Catholic approach to this is?
Oh, there's a lot of hope, absolutely. And I think that what we can say very much is that, as Catholics, we know that simply suppressing the sexual appetite, is not sufficient, because it needs to be converted, not to treat persons as objects, but have them live by reason and not urges. And really converting the appetites requires the habitual moderation of those very desires, which is really the goal of chastity. And it's true that somebody who is addicted to internet pornography, it might not be easy to regain or develop that virtue of chastity, but people do change, and they change dramatically. And if it took 2 or 3 years of embracing the benefits of chastity, 3 or 4 times a day, maybe 5 minutes a day, wouldn't it be worth it? I really think so. And I love what Pope Benedict says about love. He says, the world has made love a feeling. It's not a noun. It's not a thing. Love is a verb. It's true love. It's something we do. It's an action we take. It's a sacrifice we make in giving ourselves to another. And he says that love, though tarnished, needs to be taken up again and brought back to its original splendor, that it may illumine our life and bring it back on the right path. And St. John Paul II says that the real problem is not eros, but lust. He says that it's lust that distorts or cheapens eros. And he actually says that sexual desire that is mere lust is not erotic enough. It's a counterfeit of the true eros because it fails to recognize the true dignity and preciousness of the human person that's revealed through the body. So there's something in the beauty of our faith if we can return to that and see the benefit of it. And I think that key to treating internet pornography is the mindset of achieving the virtue of chastity. Certainly is work. But what we have discovered by those who have been healed from this addiction, and I am here to tell you, this is treatable. Internet pornography is treatable. But one of the first lessons, and the greatest lessons, it requires motivation. And if there's not motivation, the first step is to find a reason to get motivated. And once you have a reason to be motivated, the next step is to have another reason to be motivated. And then, so if motivation, then hope. Hope is a crucial ingredient because it creates the mindset that, a problem can be solved and helps, give you the energy you need. And also, learn from mistakes. So if you fall, don't make it, an avalanche. Just make it a blip on the radar and keep striving again. And so again, some of the basics, of course, is to, destroy all pornographic material that is there because that can get in the way. There's all kinds of filtering systems that you have to get both on your hub as well as your individual devices. I found parents have reflected back to me that some of the individual devices, filtering systems that have been helpful are Custodio, Custodio, or Circle Go, or Covenant Eyes. There's also a website called protectyoungeyes.com, and it constantly keeps up with what parents can do to help protect their children and their family, and filtering systems that are available. So I recommend that, protectyoungeyes.com. .com, yes.
.com, okay.
Yes, yes. And I'm just looking at the time here a little bit, but I think that one of the means of really helping to purify the memory and imagination is to do what is called a sensory exercise. And I love the sensory exercise where you imagine 5 things. Since we cannot, have our imagination consider 2 things at once. We can't intensely consider the sexual images and intensely consider the grace of the moment, the duty of the moment. So not uncommonly, I hear individuals tell me that when they're in a quiet time or they're about to go to bed or they're in adoration, that's when some of these images bubble up. Well, that's not a desire to do you in. It's the psyche's desire to be able to kind of have these images kind of bubble up and out so you can breathe free of them. And I think sometimes it can help us to understand that. But with a sensory exercise, you might imagine 5 things that you see, for example, and you take 1 or 2 seconds. So you've got to deliberately look at. So if you're in chapel, it might be, the crown of thorns on our Lord on the crucifix, or the halo around Our Lady's head, or a bouquet of flowers in front of the altar. And 5 things that you feel, maybe your feet on the floor in chapel, or your foot on the inside of the sole of your shoe, or the glasses on the bridge of your nose. 5 things that you hear, maybe somebody rustling a piece of paper, or moving their feet, or the ringing of the clock. And if there's a smell, there might be incense. Because there's a way in which, by doing so, you give a pause, you give a ponder, and allows you to reflect, and you're developing that pathway to the frontal lobe. I remember when I was still in Michigan, one day, one of our labs, he was a golden lab, was at the convent, and nobody was there to let him out. And I brought another little dog that we had that we were training, her name was Lady, to the office with me. So I just finished my patients. I was going to go to the convent for lunch. And so I put Lady in the pen, and it's now 12:15, so I'm letting Carlo out. And then I bring Lady out of the pen, and I say, oh, my gosh, she's rolled in duck poop. I'm thinking, oh, no. So I'm preparing the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yeah, I'm preparing my peanut butter and jelly sandwich is now 12:25. I have a patient at 1 to go back to the office at, and so I can't find Lady anymore. And all of a sudden I realize she's now in the living room brushing against one of the couches. And I said, oh, my gosh. So I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. I tried to do this good deed, losing all merit for my good deed, mind you. So I said, okay, I'm going to do the sensory exercise because I'm just in a bunch here about this. So I went to get a towel. I got some shampoo. I took her down to the utility sink. So I'm kind of focused on the duty of the moment, the grace of the moment. So 5 things that I see. So the towel in my hand, the bottle of shampoo, the duck poop on her fur, the utility sink. It's now 12:30. 5 things that I hear: the pitter-patter of her nails in the utility sink, an ambulance going by, the clicking of the clock, the squeezing of the shampoo in my hand. 5 things that I feel: the water running through my hand, my rubbing her fur with a shampoo, and then is there a smell? Well, all of a sudden I got some jasmine shampoo. So then the duck poop on her back started to smell like jasmine shampoo. And I'm really intently focusing on each sense that I've described. And then I pulled out the utility sink, took me maybe 5-6 minutes to wash her, and she's just kind of shaking. And I just brought a smile on my face. But you know what? She was just being a dog. But the power of focus on the duty of the moment, the grace of the moment, and allowing myself to really intensely look at 5 things that I see, 5 things that I hear, 5 things that I feel, and if there's a smell, help calm my agitation, calm my frustration, and all these wild thoughts that were going on inside of me. And it's a powerful exercise, certainly, to help purify the memory and imagination from pornography images, but also from anger, frustration, anxiety, things like that as well. So and then I encourage persons to engage in these domestic exercises also. So like when you're brushing your teeth, 5 things that you see, hear, feel, and then if there's a smell, or when you're going on a walk, and you're now developing these pathways to have your imagination imagine things that are healthy, that are part of your ordinary day in and day out. And you're also developing this pathway to the frontal lobe for self-regulation, which also helps calm down that hyper-arousal that you might have developed from all these images that are bombarding your imagination and your auditory center because of the speed at which some of these images come over. And that has been helpful for people who are trying to purify their memory and imagination.
You've also mentioned the acronym SMART.
Yes. SMART.
SMART. I really enjoy that one as well. I've used the sensatory exercise before. I don't like flying, and that exercise got me through 9 hours of a flight to Rome at one point. Sitting there focusing on the seat ahead of me, my feet and beneath me, and one by one, 9 hours. And then the next time I flew to Rome, not so bad. I had the exercise. I didn't need to use it as much. That sensory exercise is gold.
Absolutely. There's, if we shift a little bit on how, we develop habit. So basically, there's a trigger or a cue, for example, and then let's say I'm anxious about writing a paper, and it's a philosophy paper, and so then my routine is to get up and maybe get a couple of cookies. And then my reward is, well, I've had a couple of cookies, but I have to assess, is the reward really what I wanted? Because the trigger then sets off a routine, and then there's an outcome, which I like to call the reward, because it makes you really assess, is it really a reward? So did my eating cookies address my anxiety about writing this paper? No. So I'm going to have to develop another routine that more appropriately addresses what my concern is. Am I going to, review my notes? Am I going to just write down a few things of what I really want to say? And it's very important to develop a routine beforehand. And that's where the SMART goals come in, beforehand. So if if I have I've just had hip surgery, and actually this is where I presented to physicians. An orthopedic surgeon complained that his patients didn't do the exercises at home, and then they had more pain, and they didn't get up after surgery. So I said, why don't you have them write down beforehand when they're going to walk, how far they're going to walk, where they're going to walk, and have them journal that. So he tried that, and he said the patients that actually did that walked sooner and with less pain because they beforehand had developed a routine. Their trigger might have been pain or discomfort, but the routine beforehand, instead of just sitting in their chair, which the reward was really not getting any better, but those that develop a routine ahead of time then had a better outcome. And this is where then the SMART goals come. So a SMART goal, the acronym, there's a variety of them, but one acronym is SMART. It's specific. So you decide on specific time, a day, or the amount of time. And then it's measurable. So maybe the amount of time that you're going to do something. And then it's attainable. So it's actually, you can actually do it. Don't set up something for yourself that you're not going to be able to achieve. And then it's so measure, and then it's relevant. So it's actually getting you to the goal that you want. You have to assess, is this really going to take me where I want to go? And it's trackable. So you can look back and see, did this really help me get really where I wanted to go? So, for example, if I have the urge to view internet pornography and my going to bed is what triggers it, well, then I'm going to develop a routine. every time I do this, I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to get on my knees. I'm going to beg Our Lady to be beside me, and I am going to, ask for the graces to really be free of these images and really focus on her love for me. And I'm going to say 3 Hail Marys like I really mean it. Then another routine I might have is I'm going to go back to bed and maybe have a crucifix at my bedside, and I'm going to take my hands and put both hands around this crucifix, and I'm going to imagine our Lord loving me, and He loves me so much more than I can ever, ever, ever experience, and allow myself to be enveloped in His love. And I'm just taking time to pause, to ponder, to really imagine this, and that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to imagine giving Him all my sorrows, my frustrations, or my fears, and have Him bathe that with His precious blood. Wow. And then after that, part of my routine might be then to take a rosary with both hands and begin to pray a Hail Mary for each of my family members, each of my friends, a concern that I have, and really imagine Our Lady there, just being there with me in this whole process, such that, over time, and then I can also then imagine things that I'm grateful for. And just go through, the day. And all of those are directing my imagination and my memory towards things that bring me to the greatest of all saints, to a person of the Blessed Trinity, who's God Himself, to, relations that I have that bring me to things that bring me spirits of joy and gratitude. And if I begin to establish those, then I'm developing a new habit of where I bring my memory and imagination when I'm anxious, or when I'm frustrated, or when I'm lonely, or when I'm anxious or angry, that are very different than the pornography. And that can be very, very helpful.
I love how with those that you just described, it's spirit, mind, and body all working in tandem. By clutching that rosary, by clutching that crucifix with both hands, it is engaging your senses. It is solidifying this in the imagination, but also reminding you that you are a body, and making the message stick even more strongly.
Absolutely. And we can do this, time and time again. So, you don't have to be limited to just doing this when you're in bed, but how is it you can develop that routine very naturally for yourself during the day, even when you don't have those arousal patterns, when you're not trying to just remove those images, because these are very powerful. Our Lord in the parables, so beautifully invited us to use our imagination to come to prayer. He gave us that really to come to prayer, to come to relate with Him. And how is it that we can offer ourselves more ways in which we are present to Him and present to the beauty in creation, present to one another? And as we do that with our memory and imagination, and then wonder, how can we relate to the here and now, to the beauty of who you are and who I am, that it just begins then to change how I feel about myself, and it allows those spritz of dopamine, which are healthy pleasure, to give us some sense of joy and nourishment. And this is where we also need to get sufficient sleep. We need to eat properly. We need to get sufficient exercise. And then certainly as Catholics, absolutely, we have incredible resources of the sacraments, the sacrament of reconciliation that, really is such a healing balm. And then the sacrament of Eucharist. And then also reading sacred scripture. St. Thomas More once said that occupy your mind with good thoughts, or the enemy will fill them with bad ones. Unoccupied they cannot be. And so we have so much in our Catholic faith that can also be such an incredible healing balm with the sacramental life and all the Catholic resources that we have, plus some of these other very simple activities. And the nice thing is, you don't have to necessarily go see a therapist to do these things. You don't need to take a lot of time out of your already busy schedule. These can be done right in the midst of your day-to-day, where you can just take a pause, a ponder, a pray, and do some of these imaginings. And I really encourage persons to also, if they want to develop their relationships, is there something you want to thank your mom or your dad for, or your brother, or, a priest, or whatever? You write them a little note. These are the kinds of things that we would not necessarily say. It'll surprise them. And you're building these bonds of relationship that really bring you in relationship, which is what we're created for, because that's the loneliness and the irony of, this pornography that can try to substitute. We get mixed up and we think pleasure is happiness, and it's really, really not. And then too much pleasure is painful, where appropriate, healthy pleasure, can bring us in union with creation and union with one another, and gives a sense of hope in who we are and what we're doing in our day-to-day.
These are all tremendously helpful. This is one of the things that I have enjoyed in our last set of interviews on the other program, is that you have so many practical suggestions, so many practical ideas to lead people through hope to chastity. And I know you have seen this work in families and in individuals, that there is success at the end of all of this. It's a process, but there is success and hope.
Absolutely. So many persons have been, become free of this addiction. And so, again, I think, the thing that I would say is, do not be discouraged or afraid. That's the bad spirit keeping you away from really being free to love and be loved, and to know and be known. And we can't necessarily do this by ourselves. We can need to be in relationship. So if there is a spiritual director, if there is a priest, if there is, someone that you can talk to that can help guide you into some of these exercises and maybe guide you where you might get more help. It is sometimes the case that somebody does need to get some professional help. And there's also, some ways to get some specific help online. There's a program called Reclaim Sexual Health that has, you can sign up for this particular program, and there's a coach there. So you can not use your regular name and create your own password. And many of the coaches that are available 24/7 can reach out to you and help you if you're having trouble with, chastity. There are also groups that are available. There's all kinds of little videos that talk to you about some of the neurophysiology, some of which I've described to you, if you have questions. And they also have cards for clergy that they can get free and hand out if somebody comes to the confessional. They also have materials for spouses, for therapists, as well as for teenagers that can be of service. There's also another app called Fight the New Drug, which has a free version that also has similar techniques that can help individuals. So there's some who might need a little bit more help, but those are also very readily available, and they're available whenever you might need them. And I think that even the pay version of Fortify app is only $9.99 a month, but there is a free version that has been very helpful for many individuals who seek it. So I'm hopeful that this will also bring some hope. Yeah.
Those are huge resources. The Fortify app and the Fight the New Drug. My next question for you was going to be, as a Catholic community, there are so many of this that this issue touches. For those who are medical professionals, our physicians, our family physicians in particular, the nurses, nurse practitioners, internists, who are seeing families who are struggling with this in the office, and they need to have some good, reliable resources to try and help people. Our Catholic therapists, our priests, and then you also hit on the spouses, friends who are going through this. What can we give them beside I'm going to pray for you, which is important, and we need to do that. But this also gives us another level of practical resources that we can hand on to others as well.
Absolutely. And Reclaim Sexual Health is also a wonderful program that many persons have benefited from. Reclaim Sexual Health.
Sexual Health. Okay, so we've got Fortify, Reclaim Sexual Health, and Fight the New Drug. All of those tremendously helpful. And earlier,
actually, Fight the New Drug has the Fortify app. So
has the Fortify app.
So it's a Fortify app that's from Fight the New Drug. And then Reclaim Sexual Health is another program that's very helpful. Some persons have also benefited from, other programs called Strive or Integrity Restored or Covenant Eyes. It depends, which ones you might respond to. So there are a variety of ones that are available. I really like the Fortify app and Reclaim Sexual Health.
Sister, you have been so incredibly helpful here and shared a tremendous amount of information and insight and hope with our listeners here today. This is a pervasive issue. This is an evil that once we know it exists, we can fight it as a Catholic community, and we can support our brothers and sisters in Christ who are struggling with this issue. It has been a joy to have you on this program, and I'm deeply grateful for the time that you've given us today, Sister Marysia Weber. Sister, would you be so kind as to pray and close the show for today?
Yes, gladly. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Come, Holy Spirit, be our light, be our guide, be our strength. We ask you for the grace to transform us through Mary, and in Mary, a true image of Christ Jesus, for the glory of God the Father, and for the salvation of the world. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.